Hello everyone, I hope you're all good. Welcome back to another week of remote learning. This week is going to be a feedback week on your Language Paper 1 responses so far, and that is in order to prepare you for your assessment on Thursday and Friday. Today we are focusing on question 2 and question 3. So before we start, can you please make sure you have your question 2 response from the 13th of Jan and your question 3 response from the 18th of Jan. If you can't find these or you haven't saved them or kept them in a safe place, just email me and I can ping you over a copy. Alternatively, if you didn't complete these lessons, email me and I can send you a model version to work on today. Pause the video now and do whatever you need to do to make sure you have your question 2 and question 3 response in front of you. Okay, if you're back, that means you're ready to write our title, our date, our learning objective. So pause the video and copy those 3 things down now, please. All right, so for our do nows this week, we are going to actually focus on question 1. This is because it's quite a short exercise. It's good practice ahead of the assessment, and I'm not going to be dedicating a lesson for feedback on question 1, so it's just good to get you in good habits during these 3 lessons in the lead up to the assessment. So this is the extract for the question 1 today. At the corner of Oxford Circus, Rosabelle bought a bunch of violets, and that was practically the reason why she had so little tea. For a scone and a boiled egg and a cup of cocoa are not sufficient after a hard day's work in a hat shop. As she swung onto the step of the bus, grabbed her skirt with one hand and clung to the railing with the other, Rosabelle thought she would have sacrificed her soul for a good dinner, something hot and strong and filling. So your question 1 is to list 4 things from this part of the text about Rosabelle. Remember, you can use quotes or you can summarise in your own words. Make sure your list is separated into 4 separate lines and begins with words such as he, she, or it. Pause the video and complete the question 1 now, please. Okay, if you're back, that means that you're ready to make some corrections. Give it a tick if you got it right or it looks very similar to anything on the screen. If you're not sure whether you would have got full marks for this question 1, just let me know in an email and I can check that for you. So, you could have written any of the below. Pause the video now, read through those and mark your question 1 accordingly. Okay, so like the title and the LO suggest, today we are looking at question 2 and question 3. I thought I would combine those because they are the shorter questions and therefore worth less marks. So let's start off with looking at the examiner report for question 2. The examiner report is a document that AQA produce after the exam series for the year, and they summarise things that students did well, that students need to work on, and kind of all of that information. I've read through them, and these are some of the things that the examiners picked up about question 2. They said that you shouldn't just spot language devices or methods, for example, simply saying that something's a simile or a metaphor. Instead, you must analyse the impact of these language devices or methods and explain a reason behind the writer's choice for using that particular device or method. You continuously need to ask yourself, what is the writer trying to show by using this language or this device or this method? They also recognise that some students are analysing words out of context. It's really important to remember that the meaning and significance of words depend on the sentence that they are written in. So, question 2, what did we do well? We were able to generate different and sophisticated ideas about the rat. Remember, the what went well is for the majority. Some of you did struggle with this, but we're going to look at a few examples now. Someone said that the writer presents the rat as sickening and revolting. Someone said the writer presents the rat as untamed. Someone else said the writer presents the rat as a useless and squalid creature. all of these three ideas at the beginning of these students' paragraphs use some sophisticated adjectives, and they were also able to support these interpretations. What I would like you to do now is go to your question 2 response and highlight any sophisticated adjectives used to describe the rat, similar to the ones on the screen now. If you're reading your question 2 response and you can't see any sophisticated adjectives, you know that's something that you need to work on in the assessment. Pause the video and complete this task now, please. Okay, now, most importantly, question 2, what can we do better? One of the key things that I notice is that we need to develop our explanation of the language and its impact. This is a battle that I have had with you since the beginning of year 10. Our explanation and our analysis, it has to be detailed, it has to be thorough. That is where the marks are. So this is the question 2 checklist that I gave you to complete your response. And this is what a student produced from this checklist. So let's have a read. The writer uses language to describe the rat as a useless, squalid animal. That initial idea is excellent. They continue on with their quote. When Alfred sees the rat for the first time, he describes the creature as a rat with wet, greasy fur and mean eyes. That's their quote. And then they go on to identify devices and explain it. The use of the adjective greasy highlights Alfred's disgust towards the dirty creature. And then we have a link. This disgusted tone is seen later in the text when Alfred kicked it and missed it, which implies that the dirty and shabby look of the rat has enraged Alfred, and for this he now intends to kill the rat. Then we have our overall idea. Overall, the writer presents the rat as a squalid and dirty animal that annoys Alfred, the man who wants to kill him. So, looking at this response, my initial interpretation of it was that there's not enough language analysis. The question 2 assesses you on analysing language. In this person's response, this sentence here is the only piece, really, of language analysis that takes place. That is not enough. It's not detailed enough, it's not thorough enough, it's not developed enough. And I partly think that's my fault because I didn't give you more ideas about explaining the meaning in lots of details. I didn't give you enough on the checklist to support your explanation. So this was the original checklist. We had identifying the devices. I just asked you to explain the meaning in lots of details, assuming that you knew what that meant, but you didn't, and that's my fault. And then making links. So I've changed it slightly. So when we're identifying devices, we're not at this point going to identify tone. Just because some of you are using strange tone words and it doesn't link to the language, and I think it's a little bit more difficult for you to do analysis of tone. Instead, you're just going to focus on a particular word or a particular device. And then when you go on to explain the meaning in lots of details, these are some of the questions that you need to ask yourself. What does the word make you think of? What does the metaphor simile compare? What atmosphere does the semantic field create, for example? There's loads of different things that you can analyse for question 2, and we will gradually build up our analysis of those things. But these questions here are a good starting point. And then for the link, because we're not analysing tone at this point, we've changed it. So this idea is reinforced, challenged later or earlier in the text when. So it looks more difficult because it's bigger, but it will allow you to address this EBO and develop your explanation of the language and its impact. So how am I going to use this new checklist? So let's have a look at the student's response that we looked at earlier on. I am going to use the new checklist to analyse further. So I've kept everything else in the paragraph the same, but I've left a gap here to improve the analysis. So the student earlier had just written this. The use of the adjective greasy highlights Alfred's disgust toward the dirty creature. That is not necessarily incorrect, but it is nowhere near developed enough. So I I'm going to use this new checklist to help me develop this. So I've analysed the adjective greasy, and I'm going to ask myself, what does the word mean or make me think of? So I'm going to write the word greasy has associations with being, I mean, when I think of greasy, I think of like greasy hair, so with being unclean. But also, if you describe like a human being as like greasy, you would think they were like sly, but also someone who is sly and maybe like untrustworthy. I've explained it in a little bit more detail, and then I'm going to kind of summarize this analysis a little bit more. So I'm going to just say this emphasizes the rat's repulsive nature and his appearance. So that is my new analysis. And I've just used only that question to help me. So let's compare. This was the original response. Let's go back to it and highlight the analysis we had before, which was this bit here. Again, not incorrect analysis, but not detailed enough. And now we have this, where the analysis goes from here all the way down to here. This means that you are displaying to the examiner, in this case it will be me, that you can analyse language in detail. Look at the difference. Visually you can see the difference. The quality of the analysis is much better. So what I would like you to do now is go back to your question 2 response and use the improved structure to add detailed explanation of language to one of your paragraphs. Only one. So in the way that I've just done for this student's response, identify what you've analysed already and then improve it. You might need to rewind the video so you can see the questions on the checklist, but pause the video and select a piece of analysis from one of your paragraphs to improve. Okay, if you're back, that means that you have improved some analysis and your paragraph should be looking more like this one on the right here. Now, let's move on to question 3. Let's look at the examiner report before we get into it. So for question 3, the examiner recommends that you ask yourself this question. How does reading this at this point add to my understanding of the source as a whole? Remember, question 3 is about structure, so you need to think about why the writer has included something at that point. What does the writer want you to think about or understand? You cannot just retell the events of the extract. You're not just summarising it, you're analysing it. You need to explain why the writer has structured the text in this way and how they have done this. You need to identify structural features and devices that are used throughout to show an awareness of their change or development. So if the writer has used a semantic field, has that semantic field changed or has it stayed the same? And why have they done that? So what have we done well in question 3? There was a really good understanding of how the extract propping up the line developed and changes. So what I would like you to do is go to your question 3 response and highlight where you have used any structural verbs. Verbs such as these ones here in purple show to me that you understand that the extract develops and changes. So, for example, let's look at this student's response here. I'm going to go through and I'm going to highlight where they've used these structural verbs, which again indicate that they're aware that there's change. So, at the start of the extract, the writer focuses on Alfred after battle. This creates a melancholy atmosphere as he is seen all of his soldiers die. This helps us understand that Alfred is a survivor and having to deal with a gruesome view. This may help us understand the anger he will feel later. Then I would count then because it's suggesting that there's a progression. He describes the rat that was trying to push through the wooden stairs. After he shouted rat to no one in particular, he saw the rat pushing through and twisting his head. This creates an intriguing atmosphere at this time because he was just in battle watching everyone die, but then all of a sudden, and obviously this person continues on. So I need you to do the same. Pause the video, go to your question 3 and highlight where you've used any of these structural verbs. Pause the video and do that now, please. Okay, if you're back, that means you should have a highlighted response, kind of similar to this one on the screen. Now, what can we do better? What can we improve on? We need to deepen and develop our analysis of the relationship between the sections. You were all able to tell me what happens at the start, then what the writer moves on to, and then what the writer ends describing. But we were unable to link those sections together. So this is addressing this step here in the checklist. Question 3 will always ask you how the writer structures the text to interest the reader. One of the questions you need to ask yourself to analyse the structure is, how does it help us understand what has happened before or what follows? And here are some sentence starters that you can use to start you off. Again, there are a lot more structural features that we can analyse, but these are a few that I picked up in your question 3 that will help you deepen your analysis. For example, there is a juxtaposition between X and Y in order to suggest that. The mood of the event or the atmosphere of the events has changed from this to this in order to reveal. And the setting has shifted from this to this in order to convey the idea that. So how does this actually look on a response? So this is an example from one of you. Let's read it quickly. The writer then shifts to focusing on Alfred's reaction. Lovely structural verbs there, so I hope this person's highlighted those. When describing Alfred's reaction, the writer notes how he frustratingly gave chase after it. This creates an impression that the rat was extremely irritating. As a result, a disgusting mood is created as we have an experience of an animal touching you. Some nice points there. It's not developed enough. So how can I use one of these sentence structures to make it better? I've written this. There is a juxtaposition between Alfred's melancholy as he reflected on the trauma of war, and that is more towards the beginning of the extract, and his irritation and aggression in this section here, and that's in reference to this quote about giving chase to the rat. And then what does that suggest? In order to suggest that Alfred has become erratic and cannot control his emotional responses, obviously as a result of kind of the terror and the stress of war. So what I need you to do now is go to your question 3 response and use the sentence starters to add more analysis of the relationship between sections to one of your paragraphs. Only choose one. As always, make sure you're doing it in purple pen, and you can use this one to guide you, but please don't just copy it word for word because that's not beneficial for you at all. Pause the video and improve your analysis of the relationship between sections in one of your paragraphs now, please. Okay, if you're back, that means that you have produced something like this. Now it's time to submit your work. I've added this screen to the end of the PowerPoint just as a reminder because I know some of us forget, and also just to clarify how I would like work to be submitted. So you need to be submitting your work to my email, not on Show My Homework. Please do not submit work on Show My Homework. When you're writing your email, the subject of the email should look like this. English lesson, what lesson it is, and then the date. So for example, English lesson 1, and then the date. This means that when I'm tracking your work to make sure that you've done your submissions and to track your quality and the quantity of the work, I can easily find it by typing in your name and then seeing that it says English lesson 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If you're submitting handwritten work, you need to open Outlook on your phone and look for one of these images to attach a photo of your work. And if you're submitting a document on a computer, you need to open Outlook and find the paperclip icon and attach the saved document. Today, I need to see a picture of your question 1 response, the do now, and I also need to see a picture of all of your corrections and your highlighting. It's so important that I can see that to make sure that you are prepared and that you've understood the feedback ahead of the assessment. I'll just clarify. I need a picture of your work from today's and I also need a picture of your improvement and your highlighting. Pause the video, make sure you submit your work, and I will see you in the next lesson.